The Bible tells us that in the last days, a conglomerate of nations will attack Israel. And two of those nations are making big plans with one another. This is what's happening. All right, folks, let's get into it. The news here is regarding Iran and Russia. And folks, I got to tell you, you cannot make this stuff up. This is the article. I'll start it off, and then we'll get into some commentary regarding why this is such a significant issue. This article is in Israel Hayom. It is dated from earlier this week, and it says this: Israel fears Russia may transfer advanced cyber capabilities to Iran. Now, I want to make myself clear. The news story here isn't what is significant as much as the level of cooperation that is necessary in order to make this potential item happen. And I want everybody to know that this is the type of thing that 10 years ago would have seemed impossible, right? Like you could look at all of the things that are going on in the current world around us. You could look at the geopolitics of the region. You could look at what was happening with Russia. You could look at what was happening with Iran at the time. And there's no way in the world any of us would think something like this would be possible, but here it is. That's exactly what's going on. So let's get into this. The beginning of the article says this. It says, the deepening relationship between Iran and Russia is one of the negative trends in our region that has greatly alarmed the Israeli security establishment in recent times. So far, reports have mainly focused on Iran's extensive assistance to Russia, primarily in the form of selling drones that the Russians have used in their war against Ukraine. However, the security, economic, and strategic ties between the two countries have tightened significantly, and Russia's commitment to Iranian interests in the Middle East appears to be growing stronger, undoubtedly having negative implications for Israel. By the way, this is a really important note to bring up, and this article is correct in its assertion here in the first paragraph. You have to understand that for a long time, Iran has taken their hatred for Israel to a new level. They do not want Israel to do well. They want to destroy Israel. They want to destroy the United States of America. But even more significantly than that, you have to look at Russia and what Russia's interest has been in the Middle East. For a long time now, Russia's interest in the Middle East has been a very, very, very aggressive set of maneuverings because Russia saw an opportunity as early as what happened in Benghazi. If you start looking at what happened in Libya and you begin to look at everything that happened around the country of Libya during the time that happened under the Clinton State Department, that was in essence a very broadly open door that was made for Russia to be able to go in and participate in what would be a new civil war that would ensue as a result of the instability that started with Benghazi. If you remember, that situation in Benghazi opened up the door for what eventually became the assassination of Gaddafi. And when Gaddafi was assassinated, then that whole country was significantly destabilized. And in the destabilization of that country, we saw the ensuing of a pretty significant civil war. And Russia saw an opportunity to become very strategic with respect to its own security interests, not just in the northern part of Libya, but in all of Libya altogether, which would give them a gateway into what they do in the southern portion of the Mediterranean, because if you look at a map of Libya, you'll see the Mediterranean Sea, and of course the northern border of Libya, you can actually see the Mediterranean, and that would give Putin a lot of control in that very specific and significant region. The other thing is it would give Putin a lot of control as into what happens in Egypt and Sudan. And by the way, I want to point this out. In Sudan, we already know that Russia has a base at the port of Sudan, right in that area, right near Port Sudan off the Red Sea. Russia already has a base there. There are some interests that they are seeking in Eritrea. And of course, we know that there are some potential interests that may exist with Russia just south of Yemen in the Gulf of Aden. So there's a lot going on here, and all of these areas within the region, not just of North Africa, but of course in the Middle East, makes a significant difference, and it is something that we have to pay attention to. And if you remember, there was a very candid moment. It was like a hot mic moment that took place between Obama and one of the officials with the Russian Federation, where basically Obama had made a promise to create some concessions for Putin after the election and asked for cooperation. And this was actually there was a video that was very, very much being circulated all around. And here's that video. Let's take a peek.
My last election, yeah. After my election, I have more flexibility.
Yeah, I understand. I transmit this information to Vladimir and understand what.
So either way, we know that from a very early time, we know that Russia has always wanted to get their hands involved in the Middle East. And actually, the beginning of this indicator was north of Iran and, of course, slightly to the east. And if you remember, Afghanistan tells us a lot about what Russia's intentions were with respect to the Middle East. And, of course, Afghanistan was a major failure for Russia. They learned a lot of lessons from it. Of course, they're in Afghanistan right now, but they learned quite a bit. So their involvement in the Persian Gulf, their involvement in the Arabian Sea, their involvement even in the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, and the Mediterranean is a very significant part of what they consider to be their future security plans, and they will be the big player. And by the way, look, I think we should note this. When we start talking about the Middle East and we learn about this attack that's going to take place with this conglomerate of nations, Russia is going to be the leader of it all. Ezekiel 38 talks to us about this, and this is something that we know. So none of this should be unusual to us, right? But the idea that they are getting close and they're beginning to develop very close ties should be disturbing to Israel, right? But the thing that's really interesting from Ezekiel 38 that we know is we know that Israel will actually feel secure in their position, and we know that they're going to be getting along with Russia, which they kind of are already, and they are going to, believe it or not, be getting along with all of the nations that, in essence, attack them in Ezekiel 38. So we're definitely moving in that direction. We can begin to see it, but this stuff should not be a surprise to anybody. Let me read the rest of this article because this article is, this article is astounding. Look what it goes on to say. It says, beyond Iran's desire to receive aircraft, helicopters, radar systems, and other weaponry from Russia in return, one of the issues troubling the Israeli security establishment is the convergence between Iran and Russia in the cyber domain. And this is a big deal, by the way. This is disturbing a lot of people. This isn't just bothering Israel. I just want you to know this, folks, because if Iran starts becoming a larger and larger and larger player in this domain, there is no telling what extent the type of damage could be done, especially with the kind of intent that they've expressed. And I can promise you that with the death of Raisi and the death of Abdullahian, I can promise you that Khomeini is going to go out of his way to make a point. He is going to be a lot more aggressive about the stands that he takes, and the people that he appoints are going to be more radical than even Raisi and Abdullahian were. So this is really important to note. We're going to start seeing a lot more aggression when it comes to Iran, and it isn't something that should take us by shock. We know what their intent is. We know what they're doing with the nuclear bomb. I showed a video where I talked about this. We know about the secret negotiations that have been going on with the United States and in Iran. So the environment is perfect for all of this, right? Even the garbage JCPOA that the United States has been trying to resurrect. It's insane that they're even thinking about this, right? But Iran's taking full advantage of it, and so is Russia. So that's why this is a very particularly important issue. So they're very worried about Iran and Russia in the cyber domain, particularly the transfer of state-sponsored advanced cyber capabilities from Russia to Iran. These are sophisticated tools developed by governments using taxpayer funds, unlike the capabilities of individual hackers. And while Iran is known to possess decent cyber infrastructure, Russia is a cyber superpower and one of the few countries in the world with nation-state level cyber capabilities. Israel is also considered a nation with such capabilities. And folks, I would tell you that probably the top in the world right now with respect to cyber capabilities would be Israel, in my opinion. And I happen to be somewhat of a subject matter expert in this area because my background is in technology. I would say that would probably be Israel, number one. As a matter of fact, there's probably not a piece of technology that you actually touch that is not affected by Israeli technology, right? You very likely have a couple of chips that are in your phone that were invented or built or designed by Jews. And I can tell you this right now, there are a lot of areas that your life is affected by when it comes to technology. Now, I would say that coming in second would probably be Russia, maybe the Czech Republic. Taiwan has some significant ties. China, certainly. United States is behind many of those countries. I just want you to know that. that. So although we do have some very advanced cyber capabilities, it's how we apply it and the context in which we use it in that completely changes things. So all of this stuff is very, very important, right? Let me go on continuing to read this. According to a source familiar with the details, superpowers, this is the quote, superpowers like Russia have capabilities that terrorist groups or other countries do not have. Russia has different tools that can inflict significant damage on its adversaries. The source added, the cyber apparatus is focused on defense, and the defense is constantly working. We are also preparing for significant attacks. Folks, this is really important to understand this. You have to understand that, yes, Russia's capabilities are at a completely different level. They have to be in order to use the type of weaponry that they've been using and all of the significance that sort of ties to all of this. It's super, super important stuff. Look what it goes on to say. It says, since the beginning of the war on October 7th, there has been several 100% increase in significant cyber attacks on Israel, effectively a 2.5 to 3-fold rise. The main targets of these attacks have been healthcare infrastructure, academia, service and integration entities, and other critical infrastructure. Israel is also bracing for attempted attacks on the electricity grid, water systems, and other vital infrastructure. And it goes on to say, since the beginning of the war, thousands of attacks have been carried out against targets in Israel, with around 1,000 of them aimed at significant entities, posing a potentially severe risk of damage. At this stage, the damage has been contained, and thanks to the defense apparatus, no significant harm has been caused. According to a senior official familiar with the details, the scale of the attacks is unprecedented. All Iranian groups are working hard. Iranians are collaborating closely with the Russians, transferring conventional arms and drones, but likely also gaining access to sophisticated Russian cyber warfare capabilities. Guys, listen, I want to tell you what's happening here. In case you're not seeing it, in case you're not recognizing it, which most of you are because you're all very brilliant people, the connection between Russia and Iran is growing, and it's growing substantially. And there is going to come a point in time where the information they are sharing with one another becomes so significant and so critical that they are going to be joined at the hip with one another. And any maneuvering that Russia makes, Iran will join with them, and any maneuvering that Iran makes, Russia will join with them. We've already seen evidence of this. We saw this happening when Iran actually attacked Israel. We saw Russia make a very strong statement about any retaliation against Iran and Russia's intent to defend Iran's position. We've seen Russia take a stand in the Red Sea area, not in favor with the coalition forces that are in there seeking to stabilize the trade infrastructure. We're watching a lot of very collusive, highly collusive type of motions that are being made right now in the region, and all of it relates to the type of happenings that we see taking place between Russia and Iran. Now, the thing that has been sort of kept at bay up until this point, and the reason why this story is so significant, is that Russia has kept Iran from experiencing or watching or developing any type of real awareness of information that could be catastrophic, but that is beginning to change. By the way, I want to make myself very, very clear. The United States of America enabled this to happen. But here's one that's worthwhile bringing up. Remember the time where we placed sanctions on Russia because of what they did in Ukraine? First of all, the United States of America pushed Russia into doing this. The sanctions that were created against Russia were pretty significant. And with respect to everything that had happened in that arena, we simply enabled Russia to take advantage of the position that would create a lack of energy resources amongst all of Europe. So when that happened, Iran became the go-to people for providing oil for Russia when Russia needed to have some kind of subsidy take place, especially with the deal that they were beginning to make with China. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The United States of America enters into negotiations with Iran. Part of the condition of the JCPOA is that Iran, at the end of the sunset clause that we're already past, would be able to build nuclear facilities for energy under the condition that they would be under the supervision of a nation that also was a nuclear power. And the United States of America would pay that nation to actually be the supervisors for Iran in the creating and the production of the nuclear facility. Well, guess what? The United States is paying Russia to be that person who is supervising with Iran. And the worst part about that is not the fact that we're enabling Russia's economy, not the fact that we're making Putin richer, not the fact that we're even putting our own security at risk. What makes it even more dangerous is we are dramatically hurting the region, especially the Mideast, because by Russia doing this with Iran, they've also opened up an official channel for them to be able to share critical information with one another and even detrimental information, especially as it relates to these cyber attacks and what could happen. They're now exchanging information, they're exchanging arms, and they're training one another, and the United States of America is paying them to do this. But folks, here's the thing. Ezekiel 38 tells us that this would happen. Ezekiel 38 tells us that Gog, presumably the leader of Rosh, Gog is a title, the leader of Rosh, will join up with a conglomerate of nations within the region of Magog and many others, Iran being one of them, and they will attack Israel. And of course, we know that God will come to their defense. But what is remarkable about all of this is to see how this is orchestrating right now in front of us. It is so crazy to see how God is making this happen. I would have never guessed that it would have come out this way, but it is. And folks, I'm telling you, pay attention. What I need you to be looking for right now is I need you to pay attention to activity coming out of Iran. Take a look at some of the people that are directly affected by what Iran does. Pay attention to Syria. Pay attention to Iraq. Pay attention to any of the portions that are near the region of Kuwait. Look at the Persian Gulf, okay? Pay attention to even a portion of Saudi Arabia that is very close to that area. Pay attention to Bahrain. Pay attention to Pakistan and even Afghanistan. All of the things, all of the news items that we see coming out of that are going to make a significant difference, because the more and more we begin to see Tehran working with Baghdad, of course, Iraq working with Saudi Arabia, not basically under the type of auspice that we would think. There's a different type of manipulation that's going on, working with Kandahar, working with Turkey. Guys, things are changing, and they're changing dramatically, so pay attention to all of those things. It's very important. Also, pay attention to Libya. A big story is going to be told with this, and it best suits us to pay attention and use the Bible to guide us when we come to our conclusions. Time is getting away from us. We need to pay attention. All right? Jesus is coming soon. God bless you guys.